I've never, ever had a desire to follow this advice, but I read this week, that young men who have pierced ears are better prepared for marriage because they know that when they experience pain, they should buy jewelry. We're going to conclude a sermon series this morning on marriage. And just so you know a little bit about where we're going, the plan is that my next sermon series is going to be a brief one on, I haven't quite figured out the title yet, but it's going to be on how faith is reasonable, kind of an apologetic series explaining how faith is rational and following God is a rational thing. It is going to be followed by a little bit of a longer sermon series on the Gospel of Mark. So that's my plan. The only funny thing, quirk, is that I'm not going to get to my next sermon series, not start it, for 11 weeks. Believe it or not, just the way that things are going. I've already mentioned Nels and Chris are going to be here the next few weeks. We're going to have a communion service the first week that I am hopefully back. If I'm not back, Nell knows what to do. She's going to be kind of on it. But we get back late on a Saturday night, so we're going to do a communion service. I've got a little bit of a sermon prepared, but I have no idea if I'm going to be awake for it. We'll just finish traveling for 37 hours. So, then actually the week after that, we are going to continue on with an African theme the first week of December. And Charles Ibsen, who is a missionary with the Christian Missionary Alliance in the nation of Guinea, which is north of where we're going to be, he's going to bring a very interesting story of how he's starting a new ministry of trying to bring jobs to Africa and preaching the gospel at the same time. So I think it's actually going to be quite interesting. And then, of course, we'll be into Christmas stuff. So it won't be until after we're done all the Christmas stuff that I will launch into the next sermon series. Ephesians is controversial, but somewhat unfairly. Only if you don't read the whole thing. Some have tried to use it as a statement that women, according to the Bible at least, should serve men. And that's not at all the case with this passage. If you take one little verse out of context, you can claim that. But you've got to look at the whole thing. We are to live as Christians. And that is the only way to have a Christian marriage. Men serve in marriage the same way that Christ sacrificed in the church. For the purpose of helping his wife to become all that God wants her to be. Women serve as the church serves. So the husband is protected. And she helps him to become what is somewhat unnatural for him to become. I've got nothing on the back of the bulletin this week in the way of an outline. I've got the verses that I want to look at, but I've got them in a bit of a different translation, the English Standard Version, because I want us to all be together on the same translation. It's actually not what I just read from a moment ago. But the English Standard Version, it reads this: "For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body." There is a strong parallel between the Christian life and marriage. We have been united with Christ. Christ has paid a great price for us. According to Romans, through our baptism, we've been united with Jesus. We are one with him. Christ paid such a great price for us. If Jesus has done all this for us, would he ever abandon us? Would he ever give up on us? I mean, we've got a cross up here. Jesus went to the cross. He died on that for our sake. Would he ever give up on us? Would he ever leave us? Because of the price that is being paid. We are one with Jesus in God's kingdom. And Jesus has a great incentive to make sure that the church is healthy. I want to give us a quote that I ran across by a man named Charles Shedd this week that I thought really summarized this whole sermon series. And I read this: marriage is not so much finding the right person as it is being the right person. Finding a person who makes me happy and laugh is great. That's wonderful. But it's secondary to the things of Christ. And we find the things of Jesus and we grow in the things of Jesus and we do it as a partnership. It's amazing what can happen. But there's a lot of struggles to get to that stage. There was a man who was walking along a beach on the west coast of the United States. And as he was walking along, he found a bottle lying there and he looked at it. And much to his surprise, you usually expect a lamp to do this, but in this case it was a bottle. A genie popped out. It's not a true story. And the genie popped out and said, well, I certainly didn't want to get stuck in a bottle, so I'll tell you what. When we pop out of bottles, we only grant one wish. So I'll grant you a wish. And the man thought for a moment. He said, you know what? I've always wanted to go to Hawaii. But I've never been able to because I'm afraid to fly. And ships make me claustrophobic and they make me sick. So could you put a highway from here to Hawaii? The genie considered for a minute. He said, you know what? I don't think I can do that. Just think of all the work involved, all the pilings, and I have to go to the very bottom of the ocean, and what all it would take to secure that properly. Think of all the pavement that would be needed. I think you're asking a little much. Can you come up with another wish? So the man thought for a few moments, and he says, there's always been one other thing I've wanted. I'd like to be able to understand women. What makes them laugh, cry, why they're temperamental, why are they so difficult to get along with for us men? What makes them tick? And the genie said, do you want your highway to be 4 or 2 lanes? I liked it. See, my wife's not in the sanctuary, so that might be a good thing. I don't know where she is. There's 2 key words. First is nourish. There's a lot of words in the Greek New Testament about eating, or about feeding oneself. And the word nourish is kind of related to those words. Nourish is good, and so that's why I wanted this translation, but it doesn't fully catch the full idea of the Greek word up here. We find this word one other place in Scripture, and it's in the Gospels, where Jesus is telling a story about some people who are being commended in the final judgment by God. And they say along the lines of, when did we see you hungry and feed you? That's how we usually translate it, but it's the same word for nourish. It's not like, though, a word for a little baby and you feed the baby. And it's not even a word like sitting down to a meal and feeding yourself. In fact, this word is less to do with the kitchen table than it does with the pantry. With the pantry. Maybe a literal way to translate it might be more provide food for. But even that doesn't fully catch it. My dictionary says it's providing food for somebody with the implication of something that happens over a long period of time and done in such a way that it provides great nutritional value. We best look after ourselves. Well, lots of nutritional food. Kind of the idea of make sure there's lots of nutritional food available. In fact, there's no way to translate this. because it just doesn't work in English. But there's a prefix at the beginning of the word that makes it emphatic. You might translate this as very much providing very good food over a very long time. That makes no sense in English. Christ does this for the church. I'm going to tell you something. If you are a believer in Jesus Christ and you do not grow in your faith, the fault does not lie with Jesus. Because He provides us a lot of tools. He gives us the Bible, He gives us a church, He gives us books we can read, He gives us songs we can sing, He gives us all kinds of ways. He provides very well, very good food over a very long time. He provides that for us. He provides us with the opportunities to grow. A good husband, and specifically speaking to husbands here, although we're going to see this relates to women as well. A good husband nourishes and provides good food for his wife. Now, I don't think here we're necessarily talking about food. Now, some have kind of looked at that and thought, well, is the Bible saying here the man's the breadwinner in the house? I don't think so. I think that's taking a different direction than what it's meant. Because what is really meant is something deeper, is something spiritual. To provide, I suppose, opportunities for the wife over the course of their whole lives, their entire lives, to grow, to be complete. The husband has that opportunity to help his wife be everything she can be. We've already talked about the same is kind of true for the wife, for the husband. It's a little bit of a different scenario. Sometimes the wife needs to be the protector and a little bit of the pusher, but because men don't like to be the leaders in the home, they like to be the bosses, but not the leaders. And the wife has the job to help the husband develop and blossom into that role. But there's more, because we also have this key word, cherish. Cherish. We often use the word cherish, actually, with marriage. Cherish often brings up the ideal of it being fragile. It needs to be treated as fragile. And we have this key. Because marriage starts off with this idea of the way we treat each other, and it changes over time. I ran across this a couple of times by a man named Bruce Larson, who wrote, "Marriage begins warm and intimate, but consider how things change over time. In the first year, the husband says, when there's a little bit of a cold that his wife is suffering, 'Sugar, I'm worried about my little baby girl. You got a bad sniffle. I want to put you in hospital for a complete checkup. I know the food's lousy, but I've arranged for meals. It's all looked after.' In the second year, when a cold comes up, it's more like, 'Listen, honey, I don't like the sound of that cough. I've called the doctor. He's going to come over. Now, will you be a good little girl and go to bed for me?' Third year, 'Maybe you better lie down, honey. Nothing like a little rest if you're feeling bad. I'll bring you something to eat. We got any soup in the house?' Fourth year, 'Look, dear, be sensible. After you've fed the kids and washed the dishes, you better get some rest.' Fifth year, 'Why don't you take a couple of aspirin?' Sixth year, 'If you gargle something, maybe you wouldn't sit around barking like a seal all the time.' Seventh year, 'For heaven's sake, stop sneezing. What are you trying to do, give me pneumonia?' That's an exaggeration. But it does kind of catch the idea, doesn't it? And we can go well beyond the seventh year. Do you know what? I'm sorry to say it, but you are a sinner. And you always will marry a sinner. We all have struggles and difficulties. There's a bridge with some hairline cracks in the bridge that are invisible, but they're little imperfections in the integrity, the structural integrity of the bridge. And a big truck goes over the bridge, and the little hairline crack gets bigger. And the integrity of the bridge is threatened. Does the fault for that bigger crack lie with the bridge itself or with the truck? Lies with the bridge itself. Marriage shows a lot of imperfections that we have. It brings it out. And there's a lot of jokes going along about marriage, disparaging remarks about marriage, but you know what? It's blaming the wrong thing. The problem isn't the institution of marriage. That's not why there's struggles in marriage. The reason why there's struggles in marriage is because it's two sinners who come together. It's two people with great struggles. We need to get past it to become greater. And we've got two key words up here, nourishment and cherish. To provide nourishment and cherish. We need to provide nourishment. It's like a fire. Fire goes out without wood and without oxygen. Cherish. Do you really care about your marriage? Does it really matter if it's healthy? Is it something you try to protect and work on? Because if you don't look after it, you're only hurting yourself. You're not hurting your partner. Well, you are, but it comes back to yourself. You absolutely benefit if your spouse is healthy. And yet so often a lot of marriages, I mean, you try to take shots at each other. Try to put the partner in your place. And yet if we try to cherish and nourish, we benefit. I benefit if my wife is healthy. I benefit if my wife is doing well. So how do we do this? I'm going to give you 6 real quick thoughts. Don't worry, it's not going to go over. I'm going to get late because I couldn't find the music team to start the service on time, so I'm blaming them. But I won't be long. 6 quick thoughts. Number 1, we need to provide affection in our marriage. Doing things to create a climate in which my spouse is valued and knows it. It's often difficult to do, but it's nice to speak words of encouragement, to develop our physical relationship, to maybe leave cards or notes, to doing things to keeping up our appearance, and to creating time to spend time together, to learning to speak considerately to one another. That's a hard one. Speaking considerately to one another. Secondly, affection, but also develop friendship. Men love to develop friendship through recreational things. Sports, meals out, working on fun tasks together. Women more through quality of time, giving real interest to their partner. Do you know, friends share each other's worlds. We need to take an interest in what our partner is interested in. Learning to talk to each other and truly communicate. Affection. Develop friendship. Thirdly, to serve. Talked about that a little bit as we've gone through this sermon series. Often men, we take that as we're going to serve our wife as to pitch in and help out around the house. Or to help out with childcare. Things like that. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Women serve in a bit of a different way. I mean, because women do that all the time, right? I mean, that men just need to learn to pitch in. I mean, that is how women serve. Men don't often appreciate it that way. And to be honest, women have a lot less time to serve their men because of that. In ways that men like. Perhaps the greatest way I'm going to tell you that we can serve each other, though, it doesn't matter if we're talking men or women, is to pray for our partner. It is really hard to stay, angry at our partner, or want to give snide remarks, or be sarcastic with our partner when we're spending time praying for them. That is a great way to build into our marriage, is spending time. It is a game changer. It is an attitude changer. Serve. Fourthly, learn how to communicate. Neither men or women are actually as good at this as we think. I mean, men, obviously, we don't communicate. I don't know how many times I've listened to women talk, though, when they're having this conversation about, from the outside, it's two different conversations. Because both are talking, but neither's listening. Neither's healthy. I mean, because men don't listen or talk. Women talk, don't listen. Sometimes, not always. Okay? I know I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble. I tell you that you want the two worst things to say in a conversation. If you want to have a true listening conversation with your partner, I know how you feel, and I know what you mean. Because no, you don't. Those are conversations. Because what are those things in conversation? They're taking the emphasis from what you're saying back to me. Those are conversation killers. Those are ways to not listen. You want to listen and you want to talk. Ask questions. Paraphrase back what your partner's saying so you can clarify what they're saying. Those are key things. If you rather than always saying, I know how you feel, how about saying, so do you mean? Dig deep. Husbands are not good at this. Wives need to learn it too. To listen. To communicate. Fifthly, serve God together. Find ways to do and care things together. Find ways that when you're serving God, you're together. Okay, maybe one in this partnership teaches Sunday school, and that's not my thing. Okay, well, that's fine, but maybe sit down and help them cut out the crafts. That's a great way to serve together. Or find ways, somebody's hurting, go over together and drop off a casserole together. Pray for somebody together. Serve God together. Take an interest in what your spouse is doing and serve as a partnership. We struggled with that for ourselves. For a while there, Zoe was not going to come to the Congo with us. We just looked at it, it just wasn't practical. And we kind of looked at it in the end and said, when are we ever going to have a chance to do this together again? And that's why Zoe's coming. That's the whole reason Zoe's coming. Hopefully God had big plans for her over there, but that was our rationale. Yeah, to go to prison. We had no idea she'd go to prison. So affection, develop friendship, serve, learn to communicate, serve God together, and finally relax. Spend time together. Have some fun. Life's not always fun. Find ways to make it fun sometimes. Some ways to enjoy life. I ran across a quote this week that I loved, and I have no idea who said it. It's out of a book, actually, by Charles Swindoll. And he doesn't identify who he's stealing this quote from. He just says it's a famous Hollywood actor who is well known for the romantic roles in film, kind of being a playboy. And, you kind of know the figure is jumping from woman to woman, always kind of getting everybody in. Somebody who's famous for that. He doesn't identify who it was. But this person was interviewed, and they were asked, "So, okay, you're the famous lover in movies. What's your advice to all the men out there?" And this is what he said. "A great lover is someone who can satisfy one woman all her life long, and who can be satisfied by one woman all his life long. A great lover is not someone who goes from woman to woman to woman. Any dog can do that." I like that quote. That's powerful. I thought I should get advice on Hollywood. Do you know what this is all about? And this whole series is all about living as a Christian in your marriage. That we don't go to church on Sunday, but we treat our wives somewhat differently. That I hear a sermon and I apply it to the world, but not to my husband. It is all about the fact that the way I live my Christian life is lived out in my marriage. Because if it's not lived out there, there's something big missing. The Christian life